Alex. Well, I'm not there now, I don't think. Maybe I am. Hello? Hello? Yeah. Oh, my phone dropped the first time. Oh, I have no clue what's going on. I can't get Skype to work. Yeah, she's got CK coming over, my guess.
I'm on here now.
Oh, okay. All right.
Yeah, I was holding on and hung up and called back in.
Okay, yeah, I'm on this. Okay, we're live. Okay, welcome to Revelations for a minute. This is CK Quarterman with us tonight, and I'm doing this telephonically. Troy, I'll probably have to call back during the break. So what I'm gonna do? Take a break at 7, and then I will call back in either by Skype or I'll call back on my cell if I can't get Skype working. Oh yeah, the new number. I called that a minute ago. All right, thanks. All right, CK. So
sounds like we're having a time tonight.
Yes, the mouse isn't working and the Skype isn't working and a lot of things are just ain't working around here. That's because of the rain. But I still got my internal mouse here, the one built into the laptop, so I guess I'll be using that one. But it looks as though you've written a new book since the last time you were on. I know we talked about it. It seemed like you were telling me you were writing the book then, or it's about to be published. Is this it, Genesis Secrets Revealed, Primeval?
That's correct. Mm-hmm. It's the first 11 chapters of Genesis.
Oh, okay. And then what do you break down a little bit further about what it means?
Well, primeval is generally used to designate the beginning part of it, the primeval part of the earth. And so what I do is I take and go verse by verse, pretty much, unless it's, this generation, that generation. I might skip that, but I pretty much go verse by verse as a commentary through the first 11 chapters, which is the beginning of the creation of earth all the way through the Tower of Babel. and give an ongoing commentary of, from my perspective, of what's going on and what the Hebrew is saying, and trying to look at the nuances of the language, of the Hebrew language, and what is, in the Hebrew mind, when he heard the words, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth, what did he hear? What did he understand that to mean, rather than just what do I understand that to mean as a 21st century American reading it in English? So I've attempted to do that throughout the book of Genesis, the first 11 chapters of it.
And what kind of things did you find in that exegesis there?
Well, I found some things that surprised me. I found things there that I had somewhat taken for granted all the way most of my Christian experience, and I was sort of surprised. Just to give you an example to start with, the very first verse, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. In the Hebrew mind, he read that a little bit different than we do. In the beginning is best translated, beginning is best translated by a Hebrew word that means the principal thing. So in the Hebrew mind, he would have read, in the beginning, God. And he would have stopped in his thinking. And then, just like in English, we have a verb which follows on. The first thing he would have read was, in the beginning, God. And so the Bible makes no presumption of anything before God, nor does it make any presumptions around that. It just simply begins and says, in the beginning, God. And then he did something. That is, he created, and it's a very unique word, bara, that's used in there in the Hebrew, and he created the earth. And in Christianity, we in Bible schools, we get a whole theology out of that one word, bara, B-A-R-A. And the Hebrew word is unique because it means to create out of nothingness. It's a creation where nothing existed before then. There was no pre-existent matter. So the universe was created from God himself speaking forth the word. So in the Hebrew mind, it was
pretty common. That's a pretty commonly accepted, sure.
Right, but in the Hebrew mind, see, the Hebrew mind put all that together at one time. The principal thing, the thing that is in the beginning God, or Elohim. And then he created out of nothingness the earth. But when the Hebrew mind saw that word Elohim, it was also very unusual because it wasn't used often. It's the plural of the Semitic word El, E-L. And
good deal. I said, good deal. I'm writing that down. I knew that at one time, but I'd forgotten it.
Elohim, or Elohim, is a plural noun. And it's very unusual in the Hebrew language. But it comes from El, and El was a sky god, a little G-O-D. And so it's sort of in a way, it's a pun. It's saying that God is the all-powerful, above and beyond El. He is the El, the highest, the most powerful. But that sort of implied.
Pun intended. He's like a capital L.
Right, he's sort of like the capital L. And the sort of an intention in that, in the plurality of the noun, but also we of the New Testament, of course, would see maybe a foreshadowing of the Trinity there.
Yeah.
And so all of that...
I didn't know that L was spelled E-L. I was just being funny when I said capital L.
Yeah.
I'm a comedian. Okay. So then what happened after that?
Well, I also write, there's a lot of modern criticism that wants to break down
what kind of criticism?
Criticism.
Modern criticism. Okay.
That wants to, even question who wrote the book of Genesis. And Genesis, of course, by the way, means just simply beginning. But I favor the fact that I believe Jesus in the New Testament indicated that Moses wrote Genesis. And it's not a conglomeration of sources, nor did it come about just after the Babylonian captivity, but was written by Moses prior to that. So I really take a very biblical approach in all of this, but like I said, I try to dig out, what was really being said in there. Okay, let me...
Okay.
Also, I don't know if you've ever... are you familiar by chance with Psalms 82:1? It says, Elohim has taken his place, or God has taken his place in the assembly of El. In the midst of the Elohim, he holds judgment. The Syriac version says, in the congregation of the angels.
I don't remember reading it like that. But,
I think I'm reading it I'm reading it out of the actual Hebrew there, so let me go to the King James.
Okay, yeah, that's all right. Yeah. Okay, Psalms
82:1.
All right, 82:1. There it is. God standeth in the congregation of the mighty. He judgeth among the gods.
Right. Very interesting. Little G. And when I was translating that, God, Elohim, standeth in the congregation of the mighty, that word there is El, E-L. He judgeth among the gods. And if you were reading that, the actual Hebrew would actually use the word Elohim there. He judgeth among the Elohim.
You want to read it again in Hebrew, or if you got it there?
Yeah, let me pull it up. Elohim has taken his place in the assembly of El. In the midst of the Elohim, he holds judgment. Now, another thing you might want to do is go to 1 Kings 22 and verses 20 through 22.
All right, hang on. 1 Kings 22:22?
No, 20 through 22.
Okay. Almost there. Well, and they slew every one his man, and the Syrians fled. Did you say chapter 20 or 22? Hang
22.
On. I'm in the wrong chapter.
I think I said, let me check.
All right.
22, yeah.
And the
22.
Lord said, I went to the wrong chapter. And the Lord said, who shall persuade Ahab that he may go up and fall at Ramoth Gilead? And one said on this manner, and another said on that manner, and there came forth a spirit and stood before the Lord and said, I will persuade him. Right. And the Lord said unto him, wherewith? And he said, I will go forth, and I will be a lying spirit in the mouth of all the prophets. And he said, thou shalt persuade him, and travail also go forth and do so. Wow.
Now, in view of that, we won't have to go there because most of us will remember it. But in the book of Revelation, it talks about 24 chairs or 24 thrones that are around the throne. And it talks about the elders on those 24 thrones. They throw down and cast down their crowns.
Yes, I remember that.
Okay. What this is talking about, and what I like to refer to it as, is the assembly. Probably prior to even the creation of the earth, God had the congregation, or like I pull that word from the Syriac version of it, but congregation of all of the angels and so forth that stood before him. Now, of course, God doesn't need counsel in the kind of way we think of counsel, like he doesn't need anybody's help in making a decision. But as these particular verses show here in Kings, he obviously has some kind of assembly around him, or some kind of divine counsel. And what Psalms is talking about earlier when we read that, Psalms 82:1, where God takes his place in the assembly in the midst of the Elohim, he holds judgment. That's what this is referring to, is that there are many little gods, if you would, but he's the chief Elohim. And all of that sort of implied in that first verse where it says, in the beginning, Elohim. That's what the Hebrew mind would have seen in all of that. The big chief, the one who sits in the council of the heavens with all of the angels around about him, who judges in the heavens above all. That's what they would have incorporated all of that into their understanding of that very first verse, in the beginning, God.
Wow, well, that's reading a lot more into it than what we have traditionally, isn't it?
Yes, and I began to pull all these things out as I began to go through Genesis. And, you know, it's quite amazing. It sort of, where my story sort of started was with the other book, and reading Matthew, the 24th chapter, when the disciples asked Jesus, what are the days going to look like when you return? And he said, it'll be as the days of Noah. And it started me on this quest to understand, what did the disciples think that he meant when he said that? And of course, the whole first book came out of that, because the disciples were intimately familiar with things like the book of 1st Enoch. They were familiar with the story in Genesis, the 6th chapter, of the angels mating with humans, and the hybrid Nephilim that were created from that. But, when we read that as Americans, we just read right over it and don't understand what the disciples in their minds were thinking and what they already knew. And so I took this same approach in writing Genesis Secrets, as I wrote it from the standpoint of, what are all of these little nuances about the Hebrew language? And I mean, you could almost go on forever, like, little bits of things that the Hebrew mind understood just in the way the words are written, or perhaps with what the word started with and the word ended with, that would have meant something to them that to us means nothing. We don't get it when we read it in English.
Yeah, that's true. And we got to know there's been some changes, even though the King James is the best translation. What I've always heard is it's the most accurate. But I haven't studied enough of the Hebrew and Greek, I guess, to translate it myself. Are you saying that you're seeing a lot of differences between the translations, or are you saying
no, I don't see
more into it?
No, I don't, but would want to be misunderstood. I don't see differences. I think the King James does the best in translation. I just think that there are things that, because we're not Hebrews and we're not actually looking at the Hebrew language, there are just some things like we just don't quite catch. It's like a deeper meaning to what may be there. It doesn't change the fact that in the beginning God created the heavens and the earth. But the deeper meaning is when I realize the word God there is Elohim, is a little bit deeper meaning when I realize that word created is the only time that word is used in the first 6 or 7 verses of Genesis. The other times is a different word that's used that actually means made. Let's look at that, for instance. I think that'll explain what I'm talking about a little bit better. One of the things
Were you at back in first part of Genesis? You call it the first part of Genesis?
Yeah, we're going to talk about the first verse, 1 and 2 verses, for a few minutes there.
Okay.
If we don't go on for an hour on it.
Well, you got it broke down. Good.
The second verse in the King James simply says this. Now, I want you, first of all, this is a good example of the English. When I read this, I'm going to quote them both together, but I want you to realize there's a stark difference between the two verses. The first verse, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. And the second verse says, and the earth was without form and void, and darkness was upon the face of the deep, and the Spirit of God moved upon the face of the waters. Now, does it not seem like to you between the first and the second verse something was missing? All of a sudden you've got God creating the heavens and the earth, and then the earth is without form and void? What's happened? How did one get to the other? And that's what we're going to talk about for a few minutes.
Yeah, okay. I have a feeling I know where you're going, but I mean, I'm not real well versed in that theory. So let's you break it down a little bit.
Yeah.
Okay?
Well, I like to call it. It's called at times. It's called a gap theory because it refers a gap between the first and the second verse. But I like another name, which is called ruin, restoration, or reconstruction creationism. One of the things that I think the Bible is entirely accurate scientifically and literally is accurate. Now, here's where the problem comes in, is that when we read the Genesis story, we generally see 6 days of creation. But it doesn't, all of a sudden when we look at geology, there's something vastly wrong. What we know about geology does not back that up. So rather than come up with the idea that geology is wrong and somehow carbon dating is obsolete and inaccurate, well, the ruin, restoration, creationism says, okay, geology is accurate. The earth is billions of years old, but the earth was created in the first verse of Genesis, but was destroyed between the first and second verses of Genesis, and was remade in a literal 6 days. And that's where it becomes important to understand the Hebrew. I mentioned earlier that verb created in the Hebrew is bara. Well, when you read the other 6 or 7 verses, and it's where it says God made and God made, or God made, that word made is asha. And the King James is trying to help us understand the fact that it's a different word, because it doesn't translate as "and God created." It translates "and God made."
Mm-hmm.
So what this gap theory is saying is that the fall of Lucifer, which if we look through the first 11 chapters of Genesis, we don't see in there anywhere that he fell. But most of us assume by the 3rd chapter, which is the temptation chapter, where Adam and Eve fall, that he obviously must have fallen before that. So between the first, And the second verse is the best assumption to explain the time period of where he fell. And we get this from looking at the Hebrew. There's a version called E.W. Bullinger Companion Bible. And I want to read this second verse to you out of that because I think it does such a great job. He translates it this way: the beginning God prepared, formed, fashioned, and created the heavens and the earth, perfect, complete, and to be inhabited. See, Isaiah also tells us that God created the earth in order to be inhabited. So in the second verse, something had to have gone wrong. And the earth became waste and void, and darkness was upon the face of the deep, frozen ice, and the Spirit of God hovering, brooding, the beginnings of the heavens and the earth, which are now, upon the face of the waters, the melted ice. That word, and where we translate also, let me find that. The word, and the earth was without form and void. That word was is a Hebrew word, H-A-Y-A-H. And I think it's pronounced Haya. But in other places in the King James, it's translated as to become, come to pass, or became. So it's perhaps would be better translated in the earth became without form and void. See, that gives a whole different grasp upon what was going on. So what we find is that Lucifer was, and as Isaiah talks about Lucifer, that, he was an exalted being probably over interplanetary commerce. Our whole solar system probably, and I talk about this and bring this out in some places too, that probably had maybe some form of an angelic civilization, maybe on Earth, maybe even on Mars, maybe some of the other planets. And it's a possibility that where the asteroid belt is today, possibly could have been a planet. There's one of the Psalms, and in Job talks about Rahab, and the word Rahab means boaster or pride. It's possible that the asteroid belt was a planet called Rahab, but maybe that was possibly his throne, so to speak. And of course, whatever the asteroid belt was, whatever kind of planet it certainly was destroyed. All the modern research that we are able to do now with computers shows that the asteroid belt was probably a planet. And it just makes sense in the way the solar system has formed is that it was a planet. So here we've got a whole planet that was destroyed. And if you look at even the moon, you see all these, asteroid impacts upon it, Mars, and you don't see them so much on the Earth because of vegetation having covered them up. But the whole solar system went through some kind of a gigantic pounding, some kind of gigantic war or destruction that took place. My
maybe
guess
when that
is
planet blew up, it got impacted the other planets and parts of it.
Right, and by the way, that's a good way to destroy whatever civilization was here, and a good way to explain how the earth became void and without form. A judgment.
Yeah.
So it would make sense that judgment, and if we look at a geological time frame, it probably happened about 500 million years ago. So we start thinking about something like that. The devil's been around a long time.
Well, so then we wouldn't have to try to discredit carbon dating and things too. If you went with this theory, you could just have the best of both worlds, right?
That's right. You don't have to try to make the Bible discredit geology, and geology doesn't discredit the Bible.
Well, I like to think that there's scientific reasons for most of what has happened, in the Bible, and what will happen to fulfill the coming prophecies that are yet to be fulfilled. Usually you can look back and say, well, yeah, there was a major earthquake, but there were tectonic plates shifting at that time, too. So you can look back, and science is not totally discredited, I think, in most biblical incidences. That's my opinion.
And that was another interesting thing that I discovered while I was doing this in Genesis, is that in the 10th chapter of Genesis, there's a mention of a fellow by the name of Peleg, P-E-L-E-G. And it says that in his days, the continents moved. So, you start looking in Genesis, and you don't see the continents that we have today. You see one large landmass, is what you see. So what's interesting about it is that, there's a place in Genesis where it makes the mention that all these continents were broken up. And we know in a geological sense that this did happen at some point in time.
Yeah, that makes sense. I remember this Peleg guy just barely. I don't know.
Yeah, he's just mentioned in that little mention.
It makes you wonder. I guess it was there just to catch our attention. Maybe that's the only reason they put his name in there. So we'd notice that scripture maybe. I don't know. And I don't know anybody naming their kids Peleg either.
No. Have you ever heard of...
that might be a good nickname for somebody that's got a little problem wetting themselves, Peleg.
Yeah, well, I got another good one for you. Have you ever heard of Oparts? O-P-A-R-T-S?
No, I can't say that I have. Is that in the Bible, too?
No. Oparts are archaeological things that are found out of place. The things like, let me give you an example. In the book, I use, let's see, for instance, an artifact was found, and it was presented in 1886 in a scientific journal, and the periodical published confirmation that an Austrian foundry had discovered in a block of coal a small metal cube, and it was from the Trinitary period, which in geologic time is anywhere from about 1.5 million to 65 million years ago. That's called an Opart. It's out-of-place archaeological item. For instance, there was a hammer that was found. Now let me just read you a couple of these. In June 1951, in Scientific American, a report was given that a metallic vase had been dynamited out of solid rock in Dorchester, Massachusetts, and it was said to be bell-shaped, 4.5 inches high, 6.5 inches at the base, and 2.5 inches at the top, and about 1/8 of an inch in thickness. It resembled zinc in color. Had let's see. But it was blown out of solid rock 15 feet below the surface, and it was mentioned in Scientific American, Volume 7 on page 298. But these are just different kinds of things that have been found. Like one of them I can remember was a hammer that was found in a block of coal. Now you have to ask yourself, how does a hammer get into a block of coal?
Interesting, yes.
Well,
isn't coal, there's a theory that coal is like compressed people or something?
Well,
or bones?
Organic matter.
Yeah, organic matter.
Yeah, so what this ruin restoration creationism does is it explains these things by explaining that the earth once was created to be perfect, had even some form of civilization on it. That's based on a verse out of Jeremiah we could talk about. And that it was destroyed. And when it was destroyed, there were just a few little objects left over. But it explains, why we have oil. It explains some of these objects, for instance, that are, found out of place where they don't belong.
Mhm. Yeah. That's interesting. Now, so the book that you've written here, it goes into a lot of this type of detail, as I would assume,
right.
Or is it?
It does.
Are you a bit of a scientist, CK? I should ask. Are you
more
a researcher?
More of a biblical person here, but I think science backs up the biblical narrative, and that's the reason I search these things out. But when you look at the gap creationism, these geologic formations and so forth, they begin to make sense as to why they're there and where they came from in relationship to Genesis, rather than having to say that God did all this in 6 days and somehow made it all look old, which has always sounded fishy to me. Where gap creation asserts that the biblical account, that time lapse was an unknown number of years. In other words, it could have been, a million years between, or probably even more than that, between Genesis 1 and Genesis 2. And so that accounts for things like dinosaurs, oil formation, and it does not contradict Romans 5:12, where it talks about death came in with Adam. You remember that verse? By one man?
Yeah.
Right. It doesn't contradict that, because in Romans the word world there is cosmos, or social system, meaning that death came into our social system from Adam. Death could have already been in the world, which is some of the interesting things that I bring out, because when Adam was created, first of all, Adam was not created in the garden. So many people think he was created in the garden. He wasn't. The verse says that he was put in the garden, but he was created somewhere else. And I have a good idea where that was, but the word in Hebrew for garden is gan, and it means a protected place. And he was told to keep it. And the Hebrew word there refers more to guard than we think of, like till. It doesn't really mean till, it means to guard. So the question was, what was he protected from, and what was he supposed to guard? Interesting question, isn't it?
Yeah.
And the word Adam.
Yeah, go ahead. The word Adam, what?
Comes from a root that means red or rooty, or we get the idea of clay from it. But it's also the root word for Canaan. So my guess is Adam, actually his dust, or the clay that he was made from, came from Canaan land.
Okay. And we know, too, that his son Cain had to go out and find a wife. Now, was she in Canaan, his wife? Isn't that where he was sent when he...
Well, I think it's an interesting question. Who did Cain marry, and what kind of civilization was out there for him to find her from?
Yes, that's been something that's always puzzled the mind.
I wrote an article. Yeah, I wrote an article here recently about that, and it gets me in a lot of trouble because people they lose it on it. But one of my questions that I've asked is, if God created Adam, was it possible that Satan, Lucifer, had a competing creation? Where did all these Neanderthals come from? They're not from the same line that man came from. Could Satan have created them?
The breeding of, the fallen ones with the people, right? Is the common...
Well, the DNA of Neanderthals are not directly connected to the DNA of humanity. It's a different line, a different branch. They are certain that one did not come from the other.
Oh, wait a minute. You're thinking Neanderthal, not
Neanderthal.
Okay.
Cro-Magnon.
I misunderstood. I went to the wrong direction with that one. I went to the Nephilim direction. I didn't, I guess, I'm sorry, I wasn't listening when you said Neanderthal. I just assumed you said Nephilim.
No, so we haven't got there yet.
Okay. So, carry on then with your theory then that he may have found a wife of the Neanderthals. You said they had a different DNA?
That's right. That's a question I've got. I think it's a possibility that Lucifer created a competing humanity, if you would, a competing group in these Neanderthals. Because, evolution is not true since Genesis 1-2. Now, it's possible, and I hold out the possibility, and I'm looking at the geologic formations, that evolution may have been a part of the first Earth before it was destroyed. But after God remade it in 6 days, you don't see evolution at all. So this Neanderthal, Cro-Magnon, and this bunch are not something that God created. So my question is, did Lucifer have a competing creation? Science even tells us that humanity pretty much wiped out the Neanderthals.
Yes, I've heard that theory too.
Interesting supposition.
That's interesting. Now you said the DNA is totally different, which would, if say Cain had a wife taken from the Neanderthal race, wouldn't their children be kind of half and half?
Well, I think that's the reason that it's close, but it's different. I think there was interbreeding there, yes, but I think that's the reason it's as close as it is, but it's different. And that's what seems to puzzle the scientist. Now, most people get their feathers ruffled when I bring up the idea that Lucifer perhaps was able to create. But if you go to Revelation, you find out that there's a statue in Revelation that Lucifer turns to life, and it talks.
Right.
You remember that?
Interesting. Yes.
So if Lucifer is allowed to create then, who says he wasn't allowed to create before then? Why does he have, and even there, see, we trying to put different parameters on Lucifer like he's some kind of a gopher boy for God, that he's somehow on some kind of leash. I don't think the Bible teaches that at all. I think Lucifer is a free-willed being that's going around through eternity muddling everything he can muddle.
And he does imitate God. I say that often on the show here, that he is a great imitator of God. The whole concept of the Antichrist, the false prophet, and the beast. It's kind of an unholy trinity, if you will, that everything he does is kind of an answer to, well, God did it, so I can do it better, in his mind, I guess. So.
Well, and that's where my supposition comes from about who did Cain marry.
Yeah. Now, he was desperate, CK. So he was desperate to find him a wife, so he went on out there. But yeah, what does the Bible say about that? It says he went out and found a wife. So
the sort of matter of factly.
Yeah, so there had to be a wife out there for him because, you know, if you remember with Adam, there was no helpmeet that was suitable for him. That's why he had to take Eve from his rib and create her. So, wow, this is interesting food for thought there.
Well, I've got some more food for thought for you. Let's talk about Adam and Eve and what happened there. Most people, when I say the serpent in a garden, what comes to your mind?
Well, the little snake slithering in the tree and saying,
right. Well, see, that's nothing like what it really was.
That's the traditional theory, yes.
Well, it's nothing like it was. And this is part of some of the things I've really discovered while I was doing this. The Hebrew word for snake is nakash. Now, what we know as a snake, we know after the curse, after all is done, God says, you know, you've done this, you're going to crawl and you're going to eat the dust of the earth. Well, now, if you go take a snake today and you x-ray one, you'll oftentimes find that they have hind legs, but they never develop.
Yes,
just a little interesting tidbit.
Either you told me that or I've seen that theory on a show or something.
Mm-hmm.
But that is really interesting.
Well, they were... you know, they were cursed. That's the way they became, but that's not the way they were originally. The Nakash, you familiar with Adam Clarke, the great commentator?
Adam Clarke?
Mm-hmm. He wrote Clarke's commentary. He was a great commentator. And he said that the Nakash walked on 2 feet. But what we do know for a fact about the Nakash we can get from the Bible, and that is, number one, is that he had speech and a moral sense with a free will. Now, when I say this is mind-boggling to start with. Okay? He had a moral sense. He had language. Now, let me prove this to you. All right, he spoke to Eve, did he not?
He did, yeah.
Okay, he spoke. Now, I can also make the supposition that he spoke to Adam and Eve more than one time. Because just think about this. If your dog came up to you tomorrow and said, hey, you want to eat that sundae sitting there on the table? Well, that sundae sitting on the table to get put in the trash, I can assure you. You know, you'd have all kind of alarm bells going off. My dog's talking to me. Well, this creature, the Nakash, didn't raise those alarm signals. So we can presume that he talked with Adam and Eve on more than one occasion. And we do not know how long Adam and Eve were in the garden before they fell. They could have been in the garden 1,000 years. So it could have been some extended length of time that they had been having conversations with this Nakash. So for him to make a statement to Eve was not unusual. It did not raise alarm bells. Okay, so one, he had language. Two, he had a free will. He was able to do what he did. Three, he had a moral sense. And I say that because when God finds out about all of this, God curses him. Now, God would not have cursed a being who had no moral sense, who didn't know right from wrong. It wouldn't have been fair. But when you read in there where he's cursed, you stop and think about it. God's cursing him because he knew what he did was wrong. Now,
but we assumed that was the devil, you know.
Well, no,
serpent there.
No, well,
that's what the normal assumption is.
Well, but it's an assumption that the devil was around there somewhere, that it possessed him or influenced him, but the Bible never says that. I have an alternate theory for you.
All right. Has it got anything to do with the gecko? Because that's what I was thinking of, that gecko. The whole time when you're talking about this Nakash walking on 2 feet and talking and having a sense of right and wrong.
Mm-hmm.
And it's
it does sort of remind you of the gecko, yeah.
Yeah. And not only that, but didn't they use a Neanderthal in a lot of their commercials, too, over there? That's
yeah,
really
they have,
haven't they? Yeah. They've been reading your material.
Well, see, we sort of
overanalyzing their commercials.
Right. We sort of come up under this traditional thinking that Lucifer somehow, came over the garden, the walls of the garden, and whispered in the Nakash's ear or possessed the Nakash to do what he did. Now, first of all, if that happened, then the garden, the protection didn't work. And 2, Adam had already fallen in sense that he fell down on his job. If he was to protect the garden, he sure didn't do a very good job of it.
Yeah, I see.
So I'm going to make the assumption that the devil was nowhere around. So what other motive could the Nakash have had to do what he did?
Well, could he have been like a fallen angel or something? I don't know.
No, there were probably angels in the garden, but remember what you started off talking about it a while ago, but Adam picked, he didn't pick, he looked through all of the animals in the garden. That would have included the Nakash, and decided that there was no helpmate for him.
Mm-hmm.
So he overlooked the Nakash. The Nakash evidently could have held hard feelings that he wasn't picked to be Adam's helpmate.
Yeah.
Because we see the Nakash doesn't go after tempting Adam, he goes after tempting Eve. He has some kind of malevolence toward her.
Wow. Well, this is so this Nakash. What are you saying? You're saying it's like a lizard type thing that walks about on.
No,
I mean,
I'm
it
saying
wouldn't be anywhere
the
near
Nakash.
human,
from the Hebrew, we only know that he was the most beautiful and subtle creature in the garden, and that he had language, and he had a moral sense. Those are the things that we know for a fact. We don't know if he walked on 2 legs or not. The commentator Adam Clark came up with that one. But, whether he looked like a Geico or not, that's just something we're talking about. We don't really know, except that the Bible states he was very beautiful, very subtle, graceful, and sort of in a sneaky sense almost.
So it's not necessarily a serpent then, as we
Well, it wasn't a serpent. He was cursed to be a serpent, to be something that withered on the ground. He wasn't that originally.
Okay, I see.
It's the same supposition. We think that the fruit of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil was an apple. It doesn't say that. In fact, it's very unlikely that it was an apple. It was probably more of a vine and some kind of fruit of a vine. It's sort of like these legends that get started and we just take them for granted.
Yes, that's true, we do. Now, are you on for both hours tonight, CK?
I can talk as long as you need me, or I can cut it as short as you want me to.
Well, what I'd like to do, I think I can keep you on into the next hour, but what I'm going to do when we go to break here at 7, I'm going to try to get my computer working, or else I'm going to call back in and make a fresh call, because this is the last day on my cell phone minutes. And if I call back in, even on a fresh call after 7, it doesn't cost me anything. So I at least need to do that, because I'm basically out of minutes as of right now. So I'm either going to, and if I can get this up Skype-wise, I may just Skype in like I normally do, but I haven't had any luck with that.
So you want me to give you a few minutes and call back in?
Yeah. Well, no, you don't have to do anything. You can just stay on hold.
Oh, okay.
Okay. Play. You got 3 or 4 minutes to get a drink or anything like that, and then we'll resume this in just a few minutes. So I'll be right back with you, brother.
All right.
Choice is made every day. I choose my fate, and I wonder why would I wait till I die to come alive, to come alive. Every day, every day, every day, I still feel the same, and I wonder why.
Okay, I believe we are back.
The sun, don't look back. The road is long. The first days of the war gone. Take back the almost gone sun. The time, 'cause if you never leave home, never let go, you'll never make it to the great unknown till you keep.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, I believe we're back, and I am back, and I think I'm on camera even. What? Are you serious? Wow. Okay, so we had our tech issues, but it isn't the first time and probably won't be the last time, amen? Now, are you still with us, CK? Uh-oh. Now, I don't know. Honey, you might have to bring him back over. Hold on a minute, folks. We're, yeah. Oh, okay. Never mind. Okay. Okay, praise Jesus. I tell you what, ladies and gentlemen, we are dealing with C.K. Quarterman about this new book of his, and I'm going to pull it back up. Genesis Secrets Revealed, Primeval is the new book by C.K. Quarterman, and you all can check this out at his website at ckquarterman.com. That's C.K. Quarterman, like the word quarter and the word man all together. QUARTERMAN.com. And you may know C.K. Quarterman. He's been on before, And we've had a couple of discussion about his book, Fallen Angels, Giants, UFO Encounters, and the New World Order. And I've got that book over here somewhere, but that's been a good book that we've discussed several times. And CK is with us again tonight discussing his new book, Genesis Secrets Revealed, Primeval. And you can get that book again by going to ckquarterman.com. And we thank you for coming in to RadioPreacherman.com, or .tk rather, and listening and supporting this ministry. And also you can hear the archives of previously aired shows. And CK, are you back with us?
I'm back with you, yes, I sure am.
Okay. I thought maybe so. I was just telling folks where to go and get a little piece about your book. Get a little chance to get a look to it. And wow, this is exciting stuff, man. It's hard to believe we've gotten this much out of the first few chapters, a few verses of the book of Genesis. But
I told you it's a lot there.
Yeah, you study the first 11 chapters, though. Mm-hmm. So the book goes quite into some detail about all this. So.
Well, I had another thought while we were on break there a minute ago, something that I wanted to bring out. We have a lot of conceptions and misconceptions, and we're talking about, a while ago we were talking about what happened between the first verse and the second verse of Genesis.
Mm-hmm.
Well, if I asked a normal person, why did Lucifer, or Satan, why did he fall? Everybody has a pat answer, and the pat answer is pride.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I have pride in, let's see, give you an example, the different kinds of pride. I've got pride in my children. Well, maybe that's a good thing about things, but
that's pretty good.
Some people have pride in their strength.
Mm-hmm.
Some people have pride in their intelligence. So I guess the question I ask is, what kind of pride got Satan kicked out of heaven? Does the Bible tell us? I got to studying it, and lo and behold, it does tell us what was going on and why he was kicked out of heaven and what kind of pride was responsible for it. Let's go to Ezekiel, the 28th chapter.
Okay. Let me see. 28.
Yeah, the 28th chapter.
Okay, there's 30, so I'm real close.
While you're looking for it, I want to mention that, the viewer may say, well, this isn't talking about Lucifer at all. This is talking to the king of Tyrus. Well, that's generally accepted to be true, but that's also referring to a fallen angel by the name of Lucifer, who's back behind this king of Tyrus. And this is sort of like a parable. I mean, it's there, but if you want to overlook the fact of what it is, you can do that as well. Because it starts out and it says, the word of the Lord comes to upon him, and he says that, Son of man, take up a lamentation upon the king of Tyrus, and say unto him, Thus saith the Lord God, thou sealest up the sum full of wisdom and beauty and perfect in beauty. It says, thou hast been in Eden, the garden of God. Now, let me mention something here. This may not be the Eden that Adam and Eve were in.
Okay. So there's more than one, maybe. I don't know. How do you get more than one Eden? But we'll talk about that in a little bit. Go ahead.
Well, because it says, thou art the anointed shrub that covereth. I have set thee so. Thou wast upon the holy mountain of God. Thou hast walked up and down in the midst of the stones of fire. Now, some of this I can break down and understand. Some of it I'm not sure about. When it says, thou hast walked up and down in the midst of the stones of fire. The stones of fire are planets.
True. Okay, that's a good way to put that. I hadn't thought of that before.
Right.
Yeah.
And then it talks up here about the workmanship of thy tabrets and of thy pipes was prepared in thee in the day that thou wast created. So this is could be talking about something other than the Garden of Eden that we know of. Okay? It says, thou wast perfect in thy ways from the day that thou wast created till inequity was found in thee. So this is obviously not talking about the king of Tyrus.
Okay, because no man is created perfect. You're right.
That's right. Now, here's the interesting part. This is what actually happened and why Lucifer fell. By the multitude of thy merchandise. Now, if you have a red letter marker or something, if you circle that word, merchandise.
Are you in verse 5?
I'm in verse 28:16.
Oh, 16. Okay, by the I'm with you now. Okay.
By the multitude of
I thought maybe you was in a different translation. But that's a different verse. Okay, by the multitude of thy merchandise. Okay.
Now, that word merchandise means just what it says, traffic, trade, peddling. So by the multitude of thy peddling, thy trade, they have filled the midst of thee with violence, and thou hast sinned. Now, I coined a phrase out of that. I call it the mafia mentality. What kind of pride was Lucifer guilty of? It was the mafia mentality. He wanted it all. Not part of it. He wanted all of it.
Okay.
That was his sin. See, there was evidently planetary trade going on, but he evidently didn't have all of it.
Wow.
Therefore, I will cast thee as profane out of the mountain of God, and I will destroy thee, O covering cherub, from the midst of the planets, the stones of fire.
I will destroy thee, O covering, from the midst of the stones of fire. Okay. And there it says in 17, talks about his heart being lifted up because of his beauty. And thou hast corrupted thy wisdom by reason of the brightness.
Of thy brightness. See, we get part of it. We overlook part of it, and we don't get part of it. See, the 16th verse is just as heavy as the 17th verse. So it obviously there was a certain degree of pride in his own self, and also the mafia mentality. He wanted all of it. Because one verse isn't weighted any higher than the other one.
Well, I always
and then it goes on and says, thou hast defiled thy sanctuaries by the multitude of thine iniquities, by the iniquity of thy traffic.
Wow.
See, so this is referring to Genesis from the fact in Isaiah it says the earth was created to be inhabited, and the second verse where Lucifer falls. There was obviously a lot going on in interplanetary things, trade. That's where I said possibly civilizations here on the earth. I can pull you out a verse for that one too. Let's see. You go to Jeremiah. Let me make sure.
Okay, hang on. I think I can hear you now. I think I had turned down the volume, accidentally on my mic because I couldn't hear you there for a minute. So Jeremiah, what chapter?
The 4th chapter.
All right.
23rd through the 28th verse.
4:23. Got it. Okay. I beheld the earth, and lo, it was without form and void, and the heavens, and they had no light. And I beheld the mountains, and lo, they trembled, and all the hills moved lightly. I beheld, and lo, there was no man, and all the birds of the heavens were fled. I beheld, and lo, the fruitful place was a wilderness, and all the cities thereof were broken down at the presence of the Lord, and by his fierce anger. For thus hath the Lord said, the whole land, shall be desolate, yet will I not make a full end. For this
is only, yeah.
Wow. How far did you want me to read?
Time.
I'm sorry. I didn't know where to stop reading.
Yeah.
We're
this
good
is
there.
the only other time in Scripture that we have that same cliche, and the earth was without form and void.
Yeah. I mean, I've seen this before, but it didn't click to me that was that similar.
I think it's referring to this time between Genesis 1 and 1:2, because it says, and there was no man,
mm-hmm.
and the mountains and the hills trembled and moved. So I think what it's referring to in a prophetic sense, and oftentimes these prophecies are like dual prophecies. I think it's referring to something going on during the time of Jeremiah, but also looking back at Genesis 1:2.
Mm-hmm.
Oftentimes, just like we found out, he takes up a lamentation against the king of Tyrus, but he's actually referring to Lucifer in the background. Jeremiah is taking up a word against something going on during his time, but he's looking back at the destruction of the earth in Genesis 1:2.
Wow. Yes. So, what would be the big connection here with just to back up the theory of the recreation and destruction theory?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I've had a lot of people more understanding to it.
Yeah, there've been a lot of people who have mentioned that theory. Guests, and even CJ, that used to run the show, the station LBN. He held to that theory that this was a recreated Earth, an old Earth, and that there was a time, So he kind of introduced me to that. In fact, he told me to buy a Dake's Bible one time to get a look to it, and I did get the Dake's Bible, but man, is it hard to read. It's just confusion, and the print is so small. I couldn't.
Yeah, well, Dake was the one who first came out with.
What's that?
Dake was the one who first came out and made the theory popular.
Uh-huh. Yeah, that's what I kind of assumed.
Mm-hmm.
So, but yeah, and his book, it was hard to read the Bible in that version because it was like you'd read a verse and then you'd have like so many lines of commentary and then another verse in the Bible. So to actually read from verse to verse was very difficult. I found that to be the case. But
I did.
But anyway, it's just a little side note on that. So this is interesting.
I've gotten old enough now. I have to read those large print versions.
I believe the one I had was the large print one, and it was like making me have headaches or something, and get cross-eyed, or it was like I could feel it straining my eyes. It was a strange feeling that I didn't like. So here in 28 it says, "For this shall the earth mourn and the heavens above be black, because I have spoken it. I have purposed it, I will not repent, neither will I turn back from it." So it's interesting, for thus hath the Lord said, the whole land shall be desolate. Yet will I not make a full end, is what I think holds the theory together there. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Is that he made the earth desolate, but yet he didn't end the earth.
Mm-hmm.
It lends to the recreation part of the theory. So that's good in verse 27. So, very interesting, yes. So then, before the break, we were talking about the Natash and how he walked about in the garden. And yeah, we don't know. I've always said we don't know how long Adam and Eve were there and how long it was. The temptation might have been a continual thing or over a period of time. And your theory is wise, that maybe they were just so comfortable talking to this Nakash that, you know.
Right, it just did not raise any alarm bells. And, you know, some people also think that Eve ate and then Adam came along after her, and, you know, got in a conversation and ate it. But actually, it states that he was there with her. So all of this was going on at the same time he was standing there.
And then some people lend the theory to be that it was like a sexual promiscuity kind of a thing, and that he actually fathered, you know, one of the twins, Cain and Abel, and he fathered Cain. Do you hold to that, or do you think that's
No. I don't think the Bible teaches that serpent seed theory at all. I think that, you know, I don't think sex was anything involved in the garden there at all.
Mm-hmm. I was just throwing that out there. I'm not sure, you know, that I definitely won't say that I hold to that serpent seed theory, but I've talked.
No, I know some people who do though, but no, I don't.
Yeah. So that's.
And I think the book writes from a perspective where you would see that I don't agree with that either.
Right. And I think, you know, you made mention in the first hour that perhaps when Cain went out of the garden that he found a wife that was maybe not quite human, a Neanderthal or something to that effect.
Mm-hmm.
And possibly, and I found that interesting, possibly that the devil had imitated God in creation. And if you'll notice, CK, we're starting to see that again more and more with DNA and test tubes and labs and everything going on in the world, is that fallen man, as we are, still has that desire to create, and maybe that's pushed by the devil.
Yeah, maybe that actually Lucifer does as well.
Oh, heavens, yes. A lot of people have told me about the theory, how that when we get into the kings, you know, that are the fallen kings, how that the last one will be a recreation of one of the first 7, I guess. Is there 7 or there's 8? And the last one is of the 7. Is that right?
Coming out of the book of Revelation?
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah.
Some of the people think that's Nimrod.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, a lot of
I've heard that one before too, yeah, but that didn't, I wouldn't say I'd go along with that.
So you're not convinced of that now? I'm partly convinced of that, or some version of, you know, because of what they can do with DNA and with what do you call it, cloning and things.
Well, the only way you could resurrect a Nimrod from his DNA would be if you could find DNA that was that old and in one place. And I seriously doubt that.
Well, and then other people theorize that it will be a clone of Jesus. You know, I suppose you've heard that theory too, that the Antichrist will be a physical clone of the physical body of Jesus. But then, how would they get Jesus' DNA? Makes you
well, I would say that one is much farther out than I'd be willing to look at. I don't think that would be true.
Yeah. So that may not hold up a lot of water. And they say, I think they get something out of the shroud, maybe a hair or something out of the shroud that, you know, had fallen.
Well, yeah, if you think the shroud is actually what it is, I don't think it's what they claim that it is. The easiest explanation for the Antichrist is to look at just what it's saying. It says that he will be the number of a man, 666. Now, we know this is getting ahead of it a little bit, but we'll go on ahead let's go to Genesis, the 6th chapter.
All right.
Because that's just about where it's like home territory.
Yeah. After writing this book, sure.
There's actually, what takes place in the book of Revelation with the Antichrist is the same thing that's taken place here in Genesis, the 6th chapter. And it came to pass when men began to multiply on the face of the earth. Now, when I read that the other day, I thought about something interesting, too, and I wanted to mention it. I was looking at some research on statistics, and that was specifically how many people were on the earth before Noah's flood. And some Christian mathematician had come up with a formula to figure out exactly how many people were on the earth. And that formula stated that there were as many people on the earth then, or possibly more than there are in the earth now.
Yeah.
Now, that's staggering. Because in order to have an earth with 7 billion people in it, you've got to have things like refrigeration, you've got to have rail transportation, you've got to have things that you don't normally think of in terms of before Noah.
Wow. I didn't think about that.
Well, you got to have communications globally.
They couldn't just exist individually, individual cultures or whatever?
No, not with a population of 7 to 10 billion, no. You'd have to have farming like we have today. You'd have to have transportation to get that food to where it needed to be.
LIB. So what are you saying there? You're not sure that theory holds water either?
No.
Or you're saying they may have...
No, what I'm saying is, when I read this verse, and it came to pass when men began to multiply on the face of the earth. And then it occurred to me that in a time frame, we have now as many people on the earth as during the days of Noah.
Okay.
Just an interesting tidbit. In other words, when man began to multiply, it happened one time. Well, I believe, and that's what the whole book, first book I wrote about, was that it's beginning to happen again, that these fallen angels are mating with the children of men. When it came to pass, when men began to multiply on the face of the earth. In other words, it's related to the number of people as well.
Yeah, it says daughters were born unto them. Well, I expect if you're having kids, half of them's going to be daughters.
Mm-hmm. And it says that the sons of God, that's the Beni Ha Elohim, or Elohim in the Hebrew, saw the daughters of men, that they were fair, and they took them wives of all which they chose. I sort of get the idea they might not have had too much choice in that. And then it says in the 4th verse, there were giants in the earth in those days, and also after that, which to me says anytime this happens, when the sons of God, the angels of God, that's the only time you find that phrase, the Beni Ha Elohim, used is in Job when it refers to the angels of God. And the Septuagint actually translates that as the angels of God came in unto the daughters of men, and they bare children of them. The same became mighty men, which are of old, men of renown. Now, the Hebrew translates that as Nephilim or Nephilim.
Right.
The giants. Which we know you covered that pretty good in the other book too. The Nephilim. Right. And that's probably part of what we see going on today.
So, you think we're going to be back to seeing giants on the face of the earth, possibly, CK?
I think what we're going to see would better be described as hybrids, things that look like aliens, if you would.
Mm-hmm.
What I see coming is that there's going to be a full disclosure where the Earth, I think the governments of the Earth think that they have been negotiating or dealing with aliens. Well, these aren't really aliens in the sense of from other planets, but they're aliens in the sense from another dimension. They're fallen angels.
Mm-hmm.
And I think when this full disclosure comes, they come out of the closet, so to speak, and we begin to see what they look like, we'll begin to see hybrids. I think that the thing about giantism, I think, probably has been worked on for 10,000 years. They may have been able to get them to be more human-looking.
Yeah. What about transhumanism? Do you think that's
part of
mixing breeds? Is that not part of this theory with the full disclosure, or is that going to play a part in this?
No, I think that does play a part in it. I think that's all around the edges of it.
Yeah, because I know you saw something one time, you were telling me, outside of your cabin or home in the woods. And,
yeah, we were...
Tell us a little bit about that again. Was that kind of like a Sasquatch kind of experience?
Yeah, it was real late at night, and I'd taken the dog out for a walk, and got the dog outside, and when I was looking around out there with a flashlight, I saw something that looked like a Sasquatch-type thing, except it was taller than a man, and it had sort of a dog or a wolf-looking kind of face. And it just sort of stood there and stared at me, and I just immediately turned and went back inside. But it was certainly some kind of hybrid something. It wasn't human, it wasn't animal. It was something in between the two of them.
Wow.
So, and I keep up with some of this.
Did you ever hear a noise or anything? Did it ever make any noise?
If it did, I was too concerned with getting out of there. I don't recall that it did.
Well, I was just curious. I saw a thing on the telly not long ago, and these people were hearing this noise outside, and they found this dead animal one day, and it had like a face more like well, they actually showed it on the television. It wasn't quite a regular dog's looking face, It was more like a crossbred animal. It was like, the face was kind of like maybe more of a wolf or something.
Right.
But
I have since seen some on YouTube.
Yeah.
That looked similar to it.
Oh, okay. Well, we had something interesting at our last place, and we had a fence that ran along the back of the property, but I was always glad that fence was there, because in the morning, a lot of mornings, I would hear something out there along the fence, and it was making this eerie kind of a howling sound, Didn't really sound like a dog or a wolf. I couldn't pinpoint what it was, and it was too dark to see from inside the house. But it was eerie enough that it'd wake you up about 5 o'clock in the morning. I'd hear that thing out there, and it would. I'd forgotten about it really till we had this conversation. It was probably half a dozen, maybe a dozen times I heard that thing, and I always wondered if it was one of those weird animals that wasn't quite human. I don't know what it was.
I think too, what's interesting about it is I've done a lot more research even since that happened to try to figure out what was going on with this thing, and a lot of times they're also seen around UFOs. And there's a good question that comes up is how come nobody's ever caught one of these things?
What kind of UFO?
There are some.
What is it? What kind of UFO?
The Bigfoot, the Sasquatch.
Oh, the Bigfoot. Yeah. Yeah,
why
they got
nobody has ever caught one, or shot one, or killed one?
That's right.
Well,
that's right.
I've got a wonderment about that. Suppose that they're hyperdimensional right now. Suppose they're being hidden.
Uh-huh.
There's a place over in Revelation that talks about doing the tribulation, which I think we're very, very close to it. But let me say something I read today was that I think it was a foreign minister. It's one of the Jordanian ministers that came out was fussing at Israel because he's claiming that they're trying to build the third temple.
Yeah, I heard something about that, and he acted like he never heard they were going to do that.
Right, it can't like a surprise to him that what do they think they're doing, but
yeah,
it talks about during the tribulation that the devil will be cast down to the earth.
Mm-hmm.
Now, let's put that in a little bit different terms where it becomes a little bit more understandable.
Mm-hmm.
Is that during the tribulation that the devil will be cast out of the spiritual dimension into our physical dimension. Now, when that happens, he and all of his followers are going to be cast out. They're going to show up right here on the earth. So the question is, what is that going to look like? If you're the devil, you got to be able to pull that off somehow or the other. How are you going to pull that off?
Huh.
Well, you're going to pull it off as claiming they're aliens.
Sure. Okay. So maybe all this alien conspiracy and build-up has been part of the devil's plan because he knows he's going to need that as an out or an excuse.
Exactly.
In the not-so-distant future.
Exactly.
Yeah, I heard a statistic one time, and I wish I could remember it. It was back like years ago when I think Bill Clinton was the president. And it said more people believe in aliens than believe blah. I can't remember the last part. I don't know if it was in Christian, Jesus is Lord, or if it was, Bill Clinton was committing infidelity. I don't remember the rest of the thing. I don't know why somehow it had something to do with Bill Clinton or not. It was a weird thing, and I tried to remember it for a lot of years, and it's gone. But that's
there've
true.
Been a lot of studies that have been done on what people think about, whether people believed in life on other planets or aliens or that sort of thing. But evidently, a good many people think that there are. I don't think we'll ever find life on other planets as such. I think that God has sort of quarantined us over here, if you would.
Mm-hmm. So you never did find out what this thing was that you saw that night either, I guess. I mean, it never reappeared.
No, and I certainly haven't gone hunting for one.
You're not going out looking for one. Like those guys on the show. Oh, my goodness. Looking for them dang Nephilim. It's hilarious. Or not Nephilim, but the Sasquatch. So,
well, I think that's what they probably are. They're probably some form of Nephilim.
Yeah, I've wondered too. I saw a thing on the internet one day, CK, about, and they were talking about why they've never caught one. And they were saying it's because there are parts of the world that have not been discovered yet. The jungle is so dense that we can't get through. I don't know if I buy that. I don't know if there's any.
They're not very dense in North Carolina.
What's that?
And by the way, later on, about 2 weeks after I saw this, a motorist passing in the next county over took a picture on their cell phone of some kind of a Bigfoot kind of creature crossing the road. And I found that a couple of months ago, published on the internet.
So that was near where you had seen it.
Yeah, it was. I saw it in Macon County, and this was the county next to it. And there was a couple of weeks difference. So chances are they may have seen the same thing I saw.
Now, if it's some kind of what you called transhuman hybrid or something with alien agenda, or a hybrid of Satan's, you know. And you're saying maybe they disappear when they get ready
to be caught? Right. I think the only real explanation for these Sasquatch type things are that they disappear and appear, sort of like a UFO does.
Well, now somebody hypothesized too on the internet. I saw a thing, and they said how long it took for them to catch a panda bear. You know, that they believed in panda bears for like decades before anybody ever actually caught one or shot one. And I don't know.
The only thing about that was they're only known for a certain area of the world. These Sasquatch tend to show up everywhere in the world.
Oh. But always kind of out in the jungle. I mean, they don't be hanging out in the cities much, really, do they? Or were you in the city when you saw that one, or you were out in the country?
No, I wasn't in the city, no, but, you know, Washington, Oregon is where you generally hear about them, but, you know, there are reports all over the world of them, everywhere from the, you know, these snow-covered mountains to our own country. So I mean, it's, you know, if they're there, they've certainly they have to be able to appear and disappear. There's just too much smoke out there not to be some fire.
Yeah, that's a good way to look at it now. And you were going to tell us a little bit about Genesis 6 too. We talked about the men began to multiply, and the daughters were born unto them. The sons of God saw the daughters of men, that they were fair, and took wives of all they chose. And the Lord said, My spirit shall not always strive with man, for that he also is flesh, yet his days shall be 120 years. So, interesting that that's scripture number 3, the verse 3, comes right after this talk about the sons of God mating with the women of the earth.
Right, and
it's almost like a punishment.
I think the word man there in the Hebrew is Adam. It's a very generic name for man, and it includes actually the Nephilim, because the Nephilim are half human, half angelic. So what he's basically saying is that you got 120 years. That's all I'm going to allow you to live.
Yeah, it's almost like it's a punishment or something for these women and these angels for doing such.
For what was going on, obviously. And then it goes on to say that these giants in the earth, and that word giants, we keep referring to the Nephilim. That's the Hebrew word for the King James giants. And the King James giants comes from the word that's used in the Latin Bible, giantitis. But it actually has more of a connotation, if you would, to be earthborn. You know, you get the word giant meaning big, but also there's a connotation there meaning of the earth. So very interesting root for that particular word, but as you read on there, you find out that Noah is perfect in all of his generations, and that he's a righteous man. But when it says he's perfect and he's righteous, one holds as much weight in the sentence as the other one. And we all hear about Noah's, righteousness, but we don't really stop to think what it means that he was perfect in all of his generations. Well, I think what it means there is that word in the Hebrew is tameh, and it's the same word that's used to refer to the sacrificial lamb. In other words, the sacrificial lamb had to be perfect, without spot or blemish.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what it's saying about Noah's generations. Then you have to stop and ask yourself, now, why would it make any difference about his generations or his genealogy? Well, this is obviously in the 6th chapter of Genesis is some kind of saintic idea, if you would, to try to contaminate the gene pool of humanity.
Mm-hmm.
If he could have made hybrids out of all of humanity, there would have been no Savior. There would have been nobody to have no line that was uncontaminated. And that's why I think the Bible goes out of its way to state that Noah was perfect in all of his generations. Is Noah's line, lineage, or genealogy did not have any intermarriage of these Nephilim in it.
Right.
So, if you would, to say this, the ark was a genealogical pool of uncontaminated beings. If you think about it, Noah didn't pick out the animals. It says God picked them out and brought them to the ark.
That's right.
Only he knew which animals were uncontaminated.
Yeah.
It was very important that everything that was in the ark was uncontaminated, because he was going to absolutely finish this world off and then start over again with Noah and his family. There's one group of people that try to talk about there were bad genes on the ark.
Right, I was just going to say, I've heard that theory too, where one of his son's wives had a little Nephilim in her somewhere.
Well, the problem with that is recessive genes become more recessive. They don't become dominant.
Okay. Didn't know that.
If you take a set of recessive genes and you keep marrying it out, they become more recessive and more recessive, not dominant.
Okay.
That particular guy that came up with that theory just seemed to forget that part of natural history.
Yeah.
But not only that, but the fact that God himself shut the door to the ark, which is in a way approving of what's in the ark.
Right.
So why would he put something in the ark that he knew good and well was going to cause the same thing to happen later on? He wouldn't have.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. That's a good... I'm writing that down. Now, what is interesting, though, is that the Lord, he said, your flesh shall not endure more than 120 years. But then in verse 4 it says there were giants in the earth in those days, and also after that.
Right. Any time that the sons of God, the angels of God, came in into the daughters of men, you had the same thing happen. And when the Israelites in Numbers chapter 13, verse 33, went into Canaan land, they were again confronted with giants. And this was from the same kind of incursion.
Mm-hmm. So you're saying that this may be allowed to happen again.
That's correct.
And why hasn't it been allowed to happen, say, over the last, several thousand years? Has this been like something God hasn't allowed?
I don't think it's a matter of God hasn't allowed. I think that Satan has had his plans. And I think since 1948, the same thing has started going on again. But I think there's been you've got to remember, fallen angels. All right, let me back up and ask you a question. Okay, taking the fact that Nephilim, giants. King James says giants were born to women. Now, exactly how does that work? How does a giant matrate inside of a human being? Did they come out at 8 or 9 pounds and just all of a sudden pop out to 35 feet tall? How does that actually happen?
Yeah. A lot of growth, I guess. A lot of good food.
Well,
I don't know.
I think what happened was they were C-sectioned out.
Uh-huh.
And allowed to grow be outside of the womb. It's the only possible answer they could have been.
Like this, what people say happens to them sometimes when they are, quote unquote, when they're caught up with by an alien. You know, there's women that claim that they've been impregnated, and then they take them back up and take the baby out of them.
Right. In other words, it took some artificial help.
Yeah.
So that's what I think's been going on again since 1948, and it'll all of a sudden, poof, they'll be here. Now, I think the angels, they have technology, and I think what they've been working on is to make these giants a little bit less giant. You know, a little bit more passing as humans.
Okay.
But I think there's a possibility from one scripture in Daniel that there could be so many of them that they could even be large enough to be armies.
Wow. Tell us how you come up. If they were passing as humans, so they might just be people that we know. Some of them might actually be Nephilim.
Well, that would only be a guess as to how close they can pass. I don't know if I know the answer to that right off, but I have some questions. It's possible, I think.
Well, that's interesting.
In Daniel, you remember the statue of Daniel? And it tells you that the statue stands for different countries that arise to power. But then it goes on, it talks about the toes are of iron and clay.
Right.
But that they don't mix.
Mm-hmm.
That could be an illustration there of these Nephilim in the earth at the very last moments and periods of time.
Right.
Some expositors I've read recently think that that's what it's referring to.
I'm trying to think of what I've heard on that. Well, yeah, I think I've heard something about that too. But that's interesting. It's going to be interesting. I'm hoping that I don't have to see too many bad things, you know. But
well, if they start rebuilding that temple over there, I suggest we all go find us some real estate in the mountains somewhere, in a hole in the ground.
Now, how soon do you think they're going to start rebuilding this third temple? I mean, we've been hearing about it for a while.
Well, we have, Brian, but we've never had any Jordanian officials come out and even acknowledge that it's been talked about. This is the first time that it's ever come out officially and been acknowledged that anybody was even talking about it. You know, we've known about it. We've known Christianity has talked about it, but no Jordanian ministers have ever talked about it.
Yeah. That's interesting. It's it's going to be interesting. I mean, we've been looking forward to this I've heard that they've even got the walls prefabricated for the third temple, and we know I've actually talked to people who've seen where they have replicated all the menorahs and the special pictures and different things for the ceremony, and everything is, you know how everything is just so in the temple.
I think it's a group called the Jerusalem Mount Faithful. I'm not sure if that's the name of them or not, but there is definitely a group that they have recreated the entire things that are needed to do temple worship. It's all been created. The only problem they've had is the government letting them start building it.
Yeah. and they've been working on the Red Heifer. I've got a book here, and I've had Robert Ryland, the author of that book, on several times, Jesus and the Third Temple. And it's an interesting book as well. So
they're ready to go with it. It's just a matter of having the political will to go ahead and build it there.
With all that's going on with the Palestinians trying to take over and be the statehood of their own, and they're going to want to. Wow, this is timing. Wow, it could be a big war brewing.
I think we've got anywhere from tomorrow to 10 years. I don't think we got any more than that, period.
Yeah. Yep. I think that's time to spread out the altar call to the people, CK, and tell them like it is. It's time. If you ain't give your life to Jesus, hey, this is the day of salvation, and I feel His presence as I say that. This is the day, you folks out there that are listening and that listen by archives. I want you to get saved, and I mean get saved for reals. This is no time to play. Like when Gene was on last night, I had Gene Schmidt on, and he was telling us it is time to pray and to really get back to prayerful repentance and submission to God. Amen. These are the kind of things that we have to address in 2013 as it is now. I'm used to saying 2012. That yes, CK, this is the time to do this. We ain't guaranteed another day. You just said that.
The time is short.
Yeah. And at the most, we got a few years left. It's very, very likely. Even as a man, I'm in my 40s, so, I mean, how long am I going to live, even if the Lord did tarry?
Well, the thing I think is interesting there, Brian, is that in Matthew the 24th chapter, he makes a statement that seems to indicate Israel as a nation, referring to a fig tree and so forth. And he says that the generation that sees these things start will see His return.
Yeah.
So, how long is a generation, I think, is where the question comes in. But, with the age that Israel is now, it's getting close. It can't be too much longer, is the point I'm making. Is, if a generation is even 80 years, then we've got about 17 years, and if we figure tribulation is 7, that gives us 10 at the outside.
Well, in Genesis 6:3 says there that He limits us to 120 years. So even if a generation is as much as 120 years, it's not a long time. Another 40, 50 years or whatever. So, but I definitely, with everything that's heating up and going on, and now they're talking openly about the Third Temple and making Palestine a state, I wouldn't think we've got.
No, we wouldn't. I don't see how we've got long at all.
So, it is definitely time for people to search their hearts, and I'm bad for that. I mean, Gene, he always convicts me about praying more. And, I talk to the Lord all the time and stuff, but I have really, in the last 6 or 8 months, tried to incorporate more actual time on my knees praying, That's kind of where we're getting.
90 seconds.
So, we're getting there, CK. And
I know I talked to
what's that?
I talked to people all over the country since I wrote the first book, and one of the things that I see happening more and more is that evil is getting more aggressive. The people I talk to, that are having problems are having greater problems now than I've ever heard of, and having them more frequently. Everything from sleep paralysis to demons crawling on the walls at night to these abductions. And it's the same way we see, like this thing that happened up in Connecticut. They don't just kill one person, they kill 20 or 30 or 50 of them. You know, evil is getting to be more aggressive and more blatant. And I think that's another way we know that we're in Matthew the 24th chapter, is that these things are beginning to speed up. I read a report the other day that earthquakes have definitely speeded up over the last couple of years and become more numerous.
Yeah.
And these are all part of those birth pains that we're told will work.
10 seconds.
Yeah. Yep. I hear that too all the time. That they're more numerous and they're also of higher magnitudes quite often now.
They are of greater magnitude. You know, and in this country we're seeing it all over the world, severe weather in places that we've never seen it before and in ways we've never seen before.
Yeah.
You know, creation knows the time is getting short. We should ourselves figure that out too.
Yes.
And I see, you know, just like what you're talking about, I see so many of the world that is still going their way, looking for a better tomorrow. And, you know, it's not necessarily going to be that way. The Bible talks about great darkness coming on the earth. And we should get ready for that. We should be lighting our candles, as you said. We need to get ourselves right with the Lord. We need to be spiritually right. We need to accept Him as Savior. And we need to get our households in order. And furthermore, I think that we need to prepare things like food and barter materials that, you know, and get out of these big cities and just sort of get ready to hunker down and go through some very tough times, because I think we're going to go through them in this country. You know, whether or not we've got 10 years or 30 years left before He returns, in this country, our faith, I think, is going to be tried. It's coming on this whole country. I don't think we can stop that.
God help us. God help us. He always has a remnant, though, and we have hope in the second coming of Jesus Christ. So we'll be with Him sooner or later. Amen. And He said, "Don't fear those that can take your life, but fear me." You know, basically, because He can take our lives and send us to hell for eternity. So I tell you what. It is definitely time to search the souls. Each person needs to search their soul and seek out their own salvation with fear and trembling. And so I would encourage each one to do that tonight. And also to go to ckquarterman.com and check out his new book. And, either one of his books, but this book is Genesis Secrets Revealed Primeval. I guess Primeval is kind of the subtitle, right? So it's Genesis Secrets Revealed, and Primeval is the subtitle. And then, of course, The Fallen Angels, Giants UFO Encounters in the New World Order. That's his previously written book that's been out for a couple of years. So check them out at ckquarterman.com. And, man, we appreciate you coming on here tonight.
Sure, appreciate you having me. Good to talk to you again.
Yes, it's been wonderful. And these are some great food for thought. And you'll think next time you see that gecko.
Yeah, you're right.
You'll be like, yeah, he's walking on 2 feet there. And talking and carrying a cup of coffee and everything.
That's right. May have been a gecko.
Yeah. All right, man. Well, God bless you. Have a great night.
Thank you so much. You too. Bye.
Yes. Good night. All right, ladies and gentlemen, that's a wrap. Good night to all of you all. In Jesus' name.